So it was at history. It was just like, forget ours. We have stuff 100 years old here. We got that.
Yeah. And was it like a private? No, I didn't go to
Stores, but we did tour. So many and it was very, and each post was, there. We took the train everywhere, took the train to Paris, just like.
Oh yeah, one thing the one that's removed is there was two filters. Yes, so again,
Just want to make sure. It was the last one.
I knew it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to know. I mean, a lot of what they're proposing here. Is it real? Oh, you want to see anything update? No. Oh, shoot.
All right, hi everyone. Welcome to Community Board 3's May land use meeting. Member Damaris is here. I'll let her take over. But we have some new members here, so welcome everybody. And I'll let Ariadna take it away with a roll call vote while Damaris gets settled. And then let her take it away. Damaris?
Damaris, say yes.
John?
Yes.
Ariadna, yes. Alistair? Herman? Trevor?
Yes.
Jaylene? Yes. Sandra? Yes. Steve?
Yes.
Megan? Anisha? Yes. Oh, sorry, Michelle. Yeah, no, present. Stop recording.
Hi, everyone, I'm Damaris Reed. Thank you for your patience.
We finished roll call?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Let's distract.
So, our first item on the agenda is, gonna be EDC, right? Right? DCP, I'm sorry. We talked last minute, we were gonna change it, forgive me. DCP, you have your slides, okay? So, please, welcome. They're gonna be talking to us today about the city of Yes, and just so everybody is clear, this is the housing piece. There were other two pieces prior to this. There was the carbon neutrality and the economic opportunities piece. Those pieces are already done. They have passed. They have already gone through the city. There's a final vote. at
The
the end.
economic opportunity is gonna get voted on, I think, tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
So, but yeah, this is.
Got all the public comments and it's up already for vote. So right now we're focusing on housing opportunities, and so it's a big issue. And I'm gonna ask everyone, just for the sake of time, please hold your questions, and just so that you know what to expect. DCP will make their presentation, the panel, the committee members will then ask questions, and after we ask questions, then we will allow the public to speak. Okay, and when you do speak, you'll have approximately 2 minutes to speak. So if you have not registered yet to speak, please take this opportunity to do that. And that's it, thank you.
Took like half of my intro, which is great. I'm ready to go involve the city of Yes today. Hi everyone, thank you for having us here today. My name is Alison Ivan. I am the Eastside team leader in the Manhattan office. Also joined by John Mangan. He is the director of the housing division. And our hope is that between the two of us, we're able to answer any of the questions today. But if there's anything that we can get to, we will promise to come back to you with written responses to those questions. Let's get into CS. Next slide. All right, so City of Just Housing Opportunity is, like I said, a third of our City of Just tax amendments, and it is, the goal of this tax amendment is to encourage housing, a little bit of housing everywhere, sort of the city all the time, because that really is the intent here. We're paying more housing everywhere and trying to encourage that through changes in our zoning resolution. And, you know, before we get into where we're at now, I want to just, you know, take a step back, talk about how we got here. You know, I think some of you might be familiar with in 2020, when we published the city's fair housing plan, where we live report. And as part of that, you know, report, one of the things that came out was really just reforming city zoning to enable housing within the city. So, you know, we've been working on this for a few years now, a lot of analysis, planning, work has gone into this. We've really taken a hard look at our zoning to see what parts of our zoning are exclusionary zoning, what parts of our zoning need to be refreshed, what parts are redundant and just kind of be stricken out. So we just want to make sure that, you know, it's doing a lot of things, it's introducing some new programs and new proposals, but it's also doing a lot of cleanup, a lot of that aspect. So, you know, it's a pretty comprehensive attempt by the city of, by Department of City Planning to update our zoning to allow for housing. And you know, again, this is part of the official public review process before we even got here for the past year. We've been having informational sessions throughout the year. We've held, you know, our goal is really to make sure everyone's aware of what's happening here. You know, John's met with over 100 stakeholder groups, just representing all the different areas of the city and who, you know, working especially within the housing context, trying to understand their perspective and also like making sure that they know what's happening in this housing opportunity tax amendment as well. You know, and now we're here and going to our 59 community boards. Really question of like, why do we need more housing in New York City? I think everyone here feels that that's the need for that. I think, you know, as most people here are aware, probably that we're in severe housing shortage. The vacancy rate for rental apartments is historically low. We're about at 1.4% in New York City, which is, you know, unprecedented really. And then that rate is about 2.3%. And when you compare that to as recently as, you know, 2021, that was at 10%. So over, you know, the last 2 years or so, that has gone down so drastically. And the effect of that has really been felt by New Yorkers everywhere. Not, you know, and most of like, you know, most of them being red burdened, but besides being red burdened, really the consequence, like the biggest consequence that we feel and see is, you know, just not having enough homes. And that's especially felt by the marginalized in our community. One of the most common examples of that is homelessness. In, you know, 2023, we had about 90,000 New Yorkers living, you know, in shelters every single night. So that's just the reality that we're at right now. So the chart here talks about, kind of shows that New York is just not building enough housing. You know, we are seeing how housing production over New York City in the chart on the top, and you can see that most of the housing was actually built prior to, you know, in the first half of the 20th century.
I think it's on mute. Can we look at the chat?
Audio echoey.
I'm not sure where.
Give her a handheld.
Oh, that's right, okay. Or if you speak, I guess closer to
Well,
this.
just
mic,
so she can just control it.
You just gotta flick this switch up.
Did you know how to turn it on? Did you check to make sure it's on?
Testing,
Yep.
Okay.
are we good?
It's not like
Get
this.
your
Yeah. See what the gallery says. Yeah. I guess keep going, then we'll see if somebody says it's better.
All right, okay, so like I was saying, New York is just not building enough housing. If you look at this chart on top, you know, most of the housing production was done in the earlier half of the 20th century. And especially in 1961 is when, you know, housing really fell off, so housing production really fell off. And one part of the reason of that is really zoning and zoning just becoming more restrictive. While at the same time, demand for housing has really gone up. You know, so we're trying to make sure that that zoning becomes less restrictive so we can actually encourage more housing production in the city. So next slide. But okay, so one other thing, zoning is just one tool in all the things that can address housing. I think just want to make sure like everyone understands what we're doing here today. So we have a lot of different agencies working on policy, working to address the housing needs. The Department of City Planning, which, you know, we work for, is responsible for the zoning. And that is just one piece of the solution. And, you know, some of you folks might be new to zoning or don't really know what that is, but just in a nutshell, zoning controls for what can be built on any given site. It really sets the rules, sort of the parameters, so in terms of like the types of uses, whether it's residential, commercial or manufacturing, and sort of the building size and bulk in terms of, you know, height and setbacks and things like that. So the two of those things kind of control together what can be built. But the rules are just sort of that. They're rules, they're not mandates. Like you're not required to build any one thing on one site. You have, you know, depending on the zoning district that a site is located in, you have many choices. So zoning provides those choices and those parameters. But at the same time, we can also include some mandates. So one of the mandates is through for income restricted affordable housing. But you know, we don't fund the new housing or directly control what can be built. We only establish those rules about those you know, when and where it's mandatory to provide housing, and I'll get into that a little bit later. And how much housing gets built really depends on many different factors. Some of those include subsidies, tax incentives to promote housing, programs for affordable homeownership, and then tenant protections, which are really important for, you know, protecting neighborhood rights. So this is our biggest pro-housing change that the city has, you know, put together, and it is trying to do a number of different things. But if you were to simplify it in three buckets, it would be that we're proposing changes in our low density proposals, which tend to be mostly outside of Manhattan. Then we have some changes for medium and high density proposals. And then there are some, you know, changes that are widely across the city. And I'll go into each of those, you know, in detail a little bit. For the low density, I'll be providing more of an overview, just so you're aware of what's happening, throughout the city, because there's a citywide text amendment, and we're reviewing all of the text amendments, so I just want to make sure everyone here knows what they are. And also to sort of state, because, you know, like I said, this is about changes, adding housing everywhere, and, you know, all of those outer boroughs are part of that, you know, solution for housing that we have here. So, the next slide. Go to the next one. Right, so getting into low density, like I said, these don't apply to Community District 3, but, you know, for context, in many of these low density neighborhoods, exclusionary zoning rules have really made it virtually impossible to build new housing. You know, they've placed additional pressures on the high density parts of the city, so the proposal is like really aiming to address this issue. So one of our biggest, one of the proposals in our low density areas that are coming out with is the town center proposal, and that aims to create more missing middle housing. Missing middle is a category of housing that's modest in scale and often affordable to middle income residents. This is a common type of housing that's not really built often in the city anymore. And this proposal is trying to streamline the zoning rules that prevent it from being built. So that includes, restrictive limits on floor area and height, and again, so that once again, the 2 to 3 story buildings above commercial, ground floor is something that's actually easier to build and buildable throughout the city. And this is a typology that is, not new to us, like even in the outer boroughs, but for some reason, the restrictive zoning has made it virtually impossible to be built. Next slide. Our second proposal for missing middle housing is transit-oriented development, and transit-oriented development would allow for low-rise buildings, and so that is your 3 to 5 stories, depending on the underlying zoning, on sites that are near transit and meet specific criteria. Next slide. So in the rest of the low-density areas, the proposal is aiming to give homeowners more flexibility. Under this proposal, a 1 or 2 family home would be allowed to add a small accessory dwelling unit for ADU. And these small units would provide important housing options for small households, like a professional, looking to own their own place or move out for the first time, or an elderly resident who's looking to age in place. Because of their small size, they also serve different income levels than an average large single family home would. Okay. All right, so in order to allow ADUs and also provide all homeowners with the flexibility, we are adjusting rules in these low density districts. In many areas, existing buildings do not comply with the overly restrictive rules and cannot be altered for the needs of families. So in many designated 2-family, multi-family districts, the rules are so constraining that it's impossible to build any new housing except for single-family homes. So what we're doing is adjusting these rules to allow homeowners to make alterations so that they can actually build 2-family homes in a 2-family district and multi-family home in a multi-family district. Okay, so next I'll be going over the medium and high density districts, which are more applicable to these 3. Next slide. All right, so our biggest move in incentivizing affordable housing in the city is the Universal Affordability Preference, or UAP. This is really the cornerstone of the medium and high density proposals. And this is allowing for buildings to add at least 20% more housing if the additional homes are permanently affordable housing, and which includes supportive housing. So the proposal is based on existing rules that exist, for especially for affordable senior housing, to be 20% bigger than other buildings, and we're just expanding that program to now size, senior homes, but also allowing for affordable homes in general, supportive housing as well. So in some areas where the senior preference does not exist, we'll be adding this 20% bump. But in other areas, which a lot of the parts of CD3 are covered in this, there will be a limited increase in height where it's necessary to make room for the additional, affordable housing units. Next slide. All right, so let's look at what this means for CD3. In this map, you can see that the senior preference already exists in most of the district, shown here in light orange. And we'll be expanding the 20% bump for permanently affordable housing to all the remaining areas, mostly the mid blocks, about East Houston Street. So basically, after this, any site in CD3 is able to provide affordable housing to choose and be part of the UAP program. So what's really cool about this program is actually that under UAP, any units over the market rate FAR will have to be affordable at an average of 60% area median income, or AMI, which is a measure of affordability set by the federal government. Income averaging means that not all the units have to be at exactly 60% AMI, but instead we can have some some units that are lower AMI and some that are higher AMI, as long as they average out to be 60%. And this allows us to, permit and encourage more or greater range of affordability throughout these units. Slide. Here you can see an example of what a building might look like under UAP. So without UAP, we have this 8-story building with, and with UAP, we have about 20 stories more added to this, but those additional
2 stories more. 2 stories more, not 20 stories more. Sorry.
Did I say 20? 2 stories more added to it, so, but any of that additional FAR is going to be for affordable housing only. So, going through, go through a couple of examples to illustrate how UOP will work exactly, and then, and talk about how it interacts with our existing programs as well in a few slides. Next slide. So here's an example of UOP functioning in the construction of a new mixed income housing on a vacant site in an R6 district. I know we don't have an R6 district in CD3, but this is just an example to illustrate how the program would work. And just a note that the yellow on this drawing shows the additional floor area, that a developer could utilize and build if they were to include affordable housing. But in reality, the affordable housing units will be spread throughout the development. They won't be just, the 2 stories, not 20 stories on top. And that's really being very intentional about ensuring that there's no segregation of market rate and affordable units, and you're actually, especially these mixed income housing developments throughout the building. So today, going back to this example, we'll be able to get 3 FAR regardless of whether they're developing market rate or affordable in this development. And that would allow them to build about 35 units. But under UAP, they'd be able to get 3.9 FAR, and that extra FAR could only be for affordable housing. So, if it is, they can now build about 10 to 12 more affordable units on this site. And those, it might not seem like those 10 to 12 is a big number, but again, like I said in the beginning, our goal really here is a little bit housing everywhere. So if you imagine these kinds of, sites and developments throughout the city, we're really adding housing wherever possible. And then the building, again, to accommodate this additional FAR will be allowed to be 10 feet taller than it is today. Next slide. All right, so let's look at another example. Here we have a city-owned site that is going to be used for 100% affordable building in an R8B district, which we do have in CD3. Today, R8B districts do not have a preferential FAR for senior housing, so this site is limited to 47 units, no matter what kind of housing they're providing. But we're proposing that in R8B districts, and like all other districts with no existing senior housing preference or a very small preference, they receive a 20% bump for affordable housing. So in R8B, this means 4.8 FAR for affordable housing. And then the building would be allowed to be 30 feet taller so that it can accommodate that additional FAR. And this example, that translates to an additional 9 to 10 affordable homes. And just to reiterate, this is only applicable when a property owner is providing affordable housing. So the existing base heights for R8B are not changing if you're only doing market rate. This table shows the proposed adjustments to FAR and height limits under UAP for districts R6 through R8. The basic FARs and current heights would remain for these buildings that are not providing any affordable housing. But if they are providing affordable housing through the UAP program or MH, the heights and the FAR will be increased as such. And I know that, we want to make sure that every medium and high density zone district has a preference for affordable housing, and that building also can actually fit that affordable housing and additional FAR use. So these are the proposed FARs and heights for R9 through R12 districts. And we have sent these slides already to Carl and Susan, and our hope is that you can go into more detail and look at what these are. Generally within CD3, we get about 10 to 30 feet of an additional height to accommodate the FAR, depending on which zone district it is. Okay. All right, so UAP is also replacing our existing voluntary inclusionary housing program, including the inclusionary housing designated areas and R10 districts and equivalents. So like UFB, these are optional zoning tools to incentivize the creation of affordable housing. And UAP will extend the preference for affordable housing citywide to all medium and high density zone districts. So we'll just be replacing this with UAP. UAP also has other benefits compared to the VIH program, which is voluntary inclusionary housing program, in that VIH has an AMI of fixed at 80%. So UAP will be lowering that to a 60% and also allowing for income averaging. Currently, VIH can also create housing for New Yorkers, so at 80% only, which is about 101,700 for a family of 3. So if you're not at that 80%, you're out of luck. But with UAP, we'll be providing that housing at a range of incomes through this income averaging program. And practically, this means that there could be a mix of homes at different income levels, including more deeply affordable units and slightly higher income units. This table on the slide represents an example of what that mix could look like. So the Housing Opportunity Protocol is also making updates to our mandatory inclusionary housing, or MIH. I talked about in the beginning, we have some mandatory things in our zoning. This is one of those things. For those not familiar with MIH, this is the only program we have that requires affordable housing in conjunction with land use actions. So in any site where we significantly increase the residential capacity, we can map MIH to require that 20 to 30% of the floor area of a residential development has to be income restricted. And first, this proposal will allow for a new MIH option, option 3, to be standalone. So the option 3 currently cannot be standalone. It has to be mixed with the current, option 1 and 2. But what option 3 will require is that there be 20% set aside and an average of 40% AMI for the affordable units. Our proposal will also equalize MIH FAR with, for districts where UAP FAR is higher. So for example, in an R6A district, the MIH FAR will change from 3.6 to 3.9. However, the options will remain in place, meaning the same percentage of affordability will continue to be required. Finally, we're proposing to streamline rules for 100% affordable projects. Under the new regime, 100% affordable project would not be subject to overlapping and conflicting requirements in zoning text and would instead exempt 100% affordable homeownership programs from rules that prevent them from penciling out. The current MIH program is also compatible with rules, with tools that facilitate homeownership, so we're trying to fix that as well. So returning to our scenarios, I'll walk through another example of how the UAP program proposal interacts with mandatory inclusionary housing area. So let's say there is a site in an R7A district that was recently rezoned and is subject to MIH. The current maximum MIH FAR is 4.6 FAR, which is on this site results in about 54 units. Depending on the MIH area, 25 to 30% of the units would be required to be affordable. But because the UAP FAR in R7A district is 5, the MIH FAR will also be raised to 5, but the MIH affordability requirement will remain in place. So in this scenario, that means we have approximately 59 total units will be created, and 25 to 30% of those will be permanently affordable. Okay. All right, we'll get into some citywide proposals next. First, the proposal includes the creation of new zoning districts above 12 FAR. The state recently lifted the 12 FAR cap on residential uses, which we're really excited about. So essentially, before this cap lift, we had non-residential zoning districts that could be built up to 15 or 18 FAR. The residential FAR was capped at 12. With the state cap lift, we're able to introduce those similar FARs for the residential use as well. Now, this doesn't mean we're mapping these districts anywhere. We're simply adding into the zoning resolution so that they're able to be mapped in the future where appropriate. The maximum FAR for R11 and R12 districts will be 15 and 18 FAR. These zoning districts can only be mapped with mandatory inclusionary housing, so wherever we're adding these additional densities, we'll also have mandates for affordable housing. In addition, the proposal is also creating two medium density districts, R62 and R60. And the new districts being proposed are intended to fill the gap in the existing spectrum of zoning districts that we have. Next slide. So this proposal would also make it easier to add contextual infill to campuses and other irregular or challenged sites. Previous campus development often took place under tower and park style regulations called height factor. And although DCP has developed a more recent set of regulations for contextual buildings that have height limits and result in better design, these sites, especially things like nitro campuses, can't access those rules. So the proposed change would allow for height limited contextual infill on sites that would otherwise be forced to develop tall, skinny buildings or nothing at all. And a variety of other changes would address barriers faced by irregular challenge sites, including making more sites eligible for contextual developments and envelopes. Next slide. So campuses are sites defined at 1.5 acres or larger, or sites that have full control of the block. In medium and high density areas, the proposal will be doing two things. First, it would replace mixing rules that prevent zoning lots developed with height factor buildings from adding contextual height limited buildings. And second, it would align distance between buildings rules with the existing multiple dwelling law. In practice, this means that a 40-foot distance between buildings must be maintained, or for buildings that are over 125 feet, the distance must be at least 80 feet between buildings. Next slide. Okay, so next let's talk about the slugger law. For those not familiar, essentially this regulation was introduced in zoning at a time when we didn't have height limits, and it imposed height limits on narrow lots less than 45 feet wide to be limited to the width of the street it was on. So a building on a narrow lot could only be about 60 feet tall if it was on a side street. Today, however, all districts in the city either have height limits or allow for height limit options to be built. So while it may have served its purpose when it was first introduced, with the contextual zoning we have now, we don't see the same need for the slugger law. However, it won't completely go away. It's just being replaced by height limited contextual envelopes and will continue to apply when other height limits don't. So the next change I want to go over is removing outdated rules to allow for more small and shared apartments. As I mentioned in the beginning, we're all about expanding housing choices in the city, and what this means is allowing for buildings with only simple no-frill studios, as well as homes with private bedrooms but shared kitchens or other common facilities. These building types have historically served and played an important role in New York's housing landscape, especially for young working New Yorkers. But they're not allowed to be built anymore. So new small and shared apartments can provide really important housing choices for New Yorkers, especially the marginalized housing New Yorkers and people who would prefer to live alone but can't afford to. Today, we're forcing many people into living situations they don't want. In some cases, that includes doubling up in an overcrowded unit. And it also sometimes forced, young professionals to team up with roommates and take over what could otherwise be a family size unit. What's that? Our current zoning does not have a clear path for buildings, for building shared housing, so has an opportunity to create clear rules and make the process less complex to enable a full range of having shared housing options. These updated rules will make it possible to build shared housing in any multifamily zoning district. The proposal will also change the development of new construction shared housing, including affordable shared housing. Housing opportunities also continue to legalize existing unregulated shared housing, and we're allowing for small apartments by changing a rule called the dwelling unit factor, which requires buildings to have a minimum average dwelling size. The proposal will eliminate the dwelling unit factor in transit-rich areas and reduce it everywhere else. So in addition to the small and shared housing modifications, we're also proposing some limiting changes to enable more conversions. First, we'll change the eligible geography from business districts in Manhattan and limited areas in Queens and Brooklyn to the entire city. So currently, if you're not within these eligible districts or geography, you can't convert a building, even if you want to residential. So we'll be removing that and allowing for anywhere, anywhere in the city to be able to convert. This will allow for conversions of buildings beyond just large office buildings, but also things like schools or former religious buildings. And second, will allow for more recent buildings to have access to more flexible reuse regulations. Today, a building must be built prior to 1961 or 1977, depending on what part of the city it's in, to use the more flexible conversion rules. We'll move this cutoff date up to 1990, so allowing underused buildings from the 70s and 80s to convert to housing as well. Finally, our current adaptive reuse regulations only apply when a non-residential building is converting into traditional apartments. But office floor plates are, sometimes better suited for things like shared housing or dorms. So we're allowing those other types of housing models as well. Next slide. So another change we're making is to the C61G and C62G districts in CD3, which currently don't allow you to convert existing buildings to residential use without a special permit. We'll be removing that restriction so that you can convert any building built before 1990 to residential as well. Our next change seeks to expand the existing landmark transfer development rights program. The landmark TDR program was created in the 1960s to relieve the financial burdens on designated landmarks, which are subject to maintenance requirements and limited in their ability to redevelop or add new buildings on their lot. The proposal would extend this transfer opportunity to allow transfer to other zoning lots on the same block as the landmark or immediately across the street or an intersection from the block. The diagram on the slide shows the current program on top and the proposed expansion below. This would bring a lot more transfer opportunities online for these landmarks. The proposal would streamline the approval process as well, requiring the certification, and no bulk modifications are necessary to accommodate the transfer on the receiving site or an authorization when they're seeking bulk modifications. So another thing we're changing is that currently the program is not available for landmarks in historic districts or in low density districts. So this proposal would expand the applicability of the landmark TDR program to those areas. And the goal here really is to generate, a revenue stream to maintain these landmarks. A lot of these landmarks are beloved by the communities, but they really can't do anything with them in terms of being able to fund the repair and maintenance that's required. So by expanding the opportunities for these landmarks to be able to sell their rights and to, use the profit from that sale of rights, development rights, to then maintaining those sites is really, we think, important. Next slide. All right, so similar to changes, we're also proposing to special districts in the city. We don't have special districts that are affected by this in C3. We're also making some making changes to the waterfront regulations to make sure that the affordable housing can be built along the waterfront as well. We've learned from many waterfront projects we've worked on throughout the years to make appropriate changes to heighten setback to enable 100% affordable housing, the UAP program, as well as addressing the needs of constrained sites. We're achieving this through a number of changes to our heightened setback regulations with the goal of adding flexibility while preserving the intention of the waterfront regulations. All right, so another thing, the last thing I'll be going over today is that this text amendment would also eliminate required parking minimums in new buildings citywide. These rules already exist in most of Manhattan, including CD3, and mandated parking is extremely expensive to provide, and parking mandates drive up rents and also prevent new housing from being built. So, we're allowing for people to really advocate to enter those mandates. This doesn't mean that will no longer be seen parking being provided. You're still allowed to add parking to your project, and we believe that the amount of parking will be determined by the needs of that project. So like when you're building a development, you know how many parking you need because of who you're marketing for, the types of tenants you're looking for. So wherever appropriate, we'll still see parking as needed. Next slide. All right, so that concludes the overview of the proposal. I know there was a lot of detail that I went over, so we can come back to any sections if you have questions on. But first, I just want to quickly summarize the text amendment as a whole and the sort of process going forward. So the changes I'll walk through tonight are the most significant proposals in City of Yes for housing opportunity. Overall, this text amendment is aiming to create a little more housing everywhere so that each neighborhood does its part to address our housing needs. It's not just about more housing though, it's also about those more types of housing. So adding housing choices, adding housing options, including multifamily housing where it's currently not allowed because of exclusionary zoning, homes of different sizes to meet different people's needs, and crucially, a lot more affordable and supportive housing. Next slide. In addition to this presentation, we have also created many documents to help explain this text amendment. Like I mentioned at the beginning, our goal is really to make sure people are aware of this, they know what's in this, and they're able to really make informed decisions about it. So, we have an illustrated guide, one pager on explaining the different parts of the proposal, and also the full annotated text, all of which can be found on our website at nyc.gov/yes housing opportunity. Next slide. And here is our timeline. So the committee board will have 60 days to review the proposal, although we will be accepting resolutions all the way up until the vote, which isn't until September. And so that concludes what I have to say. I'd love to know what you all have to say, and thank you for having us here and any questions.
Thank you. So, please,
Hey,
Questions?
that's it now, okay. That's you were speaking, so. All right, so, thank you for that presentation. It's a lot to process. So I really do encourage the public to do everything that they can to dive into the guides, and if you see another presentation being given, this is probably my 4th time seeing this, and every time that I see it, I discover something new. So it's a lot, and it's very thorough. So we're gonna start with taking any questions from the committee. Do we have any questions from the committee members? Trevor?
So I have a few, so I'm gonna space them. So just for now, whenever I hear building in every neighborhood, that typically means building in some neighborhoods, even with these proposals. Because a lot of the areas which are also protected from building are also welfare neighborhoods. What I didn't see in there is an actual way to put housing in those areas as opposed to where it's typically improved or approved in our area, and that's in the lower income areas. I know there was a push to get a lot of housing in low income areas, so that's where people want to stay. But other parts of the city, they can't go because there's no affordable housing there, because folks know how to push back and say no. So how are you what tools are you using to make sure that everyone gets more housing as opposed to just one neighborhood?
Hey Trevor, good to see you. That's an absolutely great question. It gets to the very core of what we're up to here. As Oscar mentioned, all these proposals come from Where We Live, our fair housing report back in 2020. Chapter 6, goals, strategies, and concrete actions. I remember when we were putting them in chapter 6, thinking that there's no way that we'll ever do any of this stuff because it's just politically too tough. Fortunately, the conversation has changed a ton. One of the dynamics that is described in the Fair Housing Report is exactly what you said. and the way that the ability of higher income neighborhoods to use things like zoning and use things like historic districts and use things like politics to prevent new housing from being built there, that pushes development onto, you know, what you can shorthand as gentrifying neighborhoods around the city. And so when neighborhoods in the Upper East Side and the Upper West Side are really good at limiting development there, we have areas of those neighborhoods that are actually shrinking. They're not, it's not just that they're not building housing, they're shrinking. That's where the pressure on Harlem comes from. People can't find housing in Upper West Side, they can't find housing in Upper East Side, so they're just gonna start going north until they can afford the rent. So the goal here, when we say enabling a little more housing everywhere, you know, we mean changing the zoning to create new opportunities in every neighborhood. What we find when we look to other jurisdictions that have done stuff like this is that development flows to the higher market areas. It wants to go there. Developers want to build in those areas. It's just that residents of those neighborhoods have been really good at restricting it. And so if we are doing citywide changes that really do enable development everywhere, we expect it to take the pressure off of the central Brooklyns or the, you know, upper Manhattans of the city, or, you know, parts of Queens that have seen that under the status quo get all the development or get all the people, you know, who can't find housing in more central locations looking for housing. And so that's the strategy. And so if in fact we are able to create new opportunities for housing and affordable housing in RAP districts, wow, that opens up a lot of the Upper East Side for the first time for new development and new affordable housing. If we are able to relax some of the limits on infill in campuses, that can create some additional opportunities for height limited infill on the Upper West Side, you know, things like that, in a way that really will create housing in those areas for the first time in a long time and take pressure off of areas that under the status quo just get buried. Just one more thing before I, you know, last year, 10 community districts created as much housing as the other 49. The year before, 9 community districts created as much housing as the other 50. That gives you a sense of the imbalance. If we can correct that imbalance, we can do justice to the areas that just, you know, bear the brunt of the shortage today.
Just a follow up to that, and then I'll stop and go around again. But typically, when you see these types of proposals, I mean, it's usually one area zone. But with that, the city also provides money for transportation, for parks, for other areas. You're doing the entire city, or you want to do the entire city. How are you going to provide those benefits for those areas that get hit with a lot of housing? Because it won't just impact those areas that don't have, it will impact those areas that do have, because of, especially C4 R10 areas, that need to build more. So what are you doing financially to provide support for those areas that are going to get these units?
No, thanks. That's a great question as well. I feel like you're asking all these really good basic questions that get a lot of the fundamentals out there. I think of these proposals, which really are incremental changes across the widest possible geography, as complementary to neighborhood planning efforts. And in neighborhood planning efforts, you really are fundamentally changing the nature of a neighborhood. You know, Gowanus has 8,000 units in the pipeline right now, you know, and it used to just be underutilized manufacturing land. That's a neighborhood rezoning. And if you're going to do something like that, you absolutely need billions in infrastructure improvements. This, on the other hand, incremental changes across the widest possible geography. We engaged in the biggest environmental review ever. Well, it's in process right now still, but the draft EIS is out there. We found that at the high end of the estimate, that these proposals would create about 0.7 units per acre over 15 years. 0.7 units per acre over 15 years. So the secret sauce of these proposals really is just the geography. It's a big city. And for the first time in history, we're actually trying to create more housing across the entire expanse of it. And that means that individual neighborhoods, while we have estimate ranges for units for each neighborhood tabulation area in the city. There are 197 neighborhood tabulation areas. It's a smaller geography than community board. We have unit ranges for each of those, but we really do not expect to see anything on the scale of a neighborhood rezoning or even a large private rezoning in any one part of the city That doesn't mean that there are no infrastructure consequences. You know, we have to keep an eye on areas where schools are oversubscribed today, or the sewer infrastructure is substandard, or open space is substandard. Definitely. But in general, we're not bringing enough housing to any one area to create these impacts that you see in a neighborhood context. That said, we're working with all the agencies on it. This is probably the biggest city priority right now, working with all the agencies, and because it's a priority for the administration, they are using this as an opportunity to do comprehensive looks of their own, and it's a leverage point for community boards, for council members, for council as a whole, to get the types of improvements that they think their neighborhoods deserve today.
Any other questions? Steve?
Yeah, during your presentation, you talked about voluntary inclusionary housing zones. In our neighborhood, which had a major rezoning in 2008, which also included contextual zoning. As I recall, the voluntary zones were up to 5.4 for as of right, and 7.2 for the inclusionary. So when you say replacing that, what does that actually mean? I was a little unclear as to like what the new FARs would be. Is that 20% more for each, or?
Gotcha. In general, those the inclusionary housing designated areas within Community District 3, they would retain the same maximum FAR. But UAP would give you just a max market rate and then a max affordable above that. It would be about the same amount of affordable, but we are replacing, under the IH program, it creates units at 80% AMI and only 80% AMI. So, you know, like Oscar said, if you don't earn 79% of AMI, like you can't even apply for it. Also, I think many people in this room know what AMIs have done in recent years. 80% AMI isn't what it used to be. So in replacing the IH programs, we're driving AMIs down to 60%. And then we are also enabling income averaging for the first time. And that will enable us to hit units at 30, 60, 90, 40, 50, 70, 80 for a range of families. And that is personally just really exciting. And we've been working with HPD on that as well. And then finally, you know, again, the secret sauce is geography. Taking an inclusionary housing framework that applies to about 13% of medium and high density districts today and expanding it across 100% of medium and high density districts. So everywhere in medium and high density districts, if you want to max out your lot, you have to provide permanently affordable housing at an average of 60% AMI, period. Because it clicks into the existing zoning framework, we were able to do a little thought experiment. If UAP had been around since 2014, how many affordable units would we have created? That assumes 100% affordable buildings, a little bit bigger. Mixed income buildings, a little bit bigger at the same affordability ratio. And we found we would have created 20,000 additional income restricted units at an average of 60% AMI, which is more than all of our IH programs have created in New York City history since they started in 1987. So again, the geography going from 13% to 100%, we expect, you know, about 10 times more affordable housing out of these programs. And so UAP is our workhorse out of everything else that presented tonight. UAP is the biggest move.
One other question. Given that we have contextual zoning, also we have basically on side streets like 80-foot height limits in over 100 city blocks. So what does the height limit become under program?
RIP. In RIP, that is one where that has a tight envelope already, even for the existing four FAR. We are giving it an additional 20% bump to accommodate affordable and supportive housing. That requires 3 additional stories. So that RIP is probably the district that sees the biggest proportional change in height. We expect to hear about this. Oscar and I were at Community District 8, I think last week, was it? It's all a blur. And you know, when we were creating UAP, and we looked at that slide that shows here are the medium and high density districts with an existing preference for senior affordable, here are the ones without it. if we didn't create that new bump for districts that didn't have it, we would have basically left out the Upper East Side, large portions of the Upper West Side, and yes, portions of Community District 3, from what is, I think, the largest fair housing proposal that we've ever made. So we, gritted our teeth and we did it, but you have put your finger on a fairly significant height increase in order to enable more affordable housing in some of the, currently most protected parts of the city. I wouldn't apply those adjectives to the Community District 3 portions, but Upper East Side, Upper West Side, RFB, we really wanted to find a way to create affordable housing in those areas.
All right, Sandra next and then Michelle.
I just didn't catch it.
Sandra next and then Michelle, right? Well, you have a follow-up?
I just have clarification to what, is it R E B as in boy? Okay, sorry, I just.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, so, you went a little quickly on the landmarks portion, the benefits of the landmarks. Can you go over that really quickly for me, because that will help me. First of all, you're talking about existing, right? You're not talking about prospective landmarks, right?
Well, this would apply to prospective landmarks as well. But the way I put it is that in 1968, the city created a transferable development rights program. That is, landmarks, they can't develop their site, they can't enlarge their sites typically. So the city enabled them to take unused development rights and transfer them to neighbors so that they could get some money, kind of to compensate them for the restrictions that were placed on their site.
Right.
Well, the transfer radius is so tight and the procedure required is so high, a full ULURP, 2 years and a couple $100,000 or whatever, that there have only been 12 transfers in almost 60 years. That's it.
Wow.
And so it's not really a meaningful tool to help landmarks. And I can tell you, there are many, many struggling landmarks across the city, especially things like churches, they need a new roof, they're landmarked, they can't monetize their property in any way. So I was actually talking to a landmarked Episcopal church in Crown Heights a couple months ago. And when I said, we're proposing to expand the transfer radius anywhere on your entire block or across the street from that block, and we'll reduce the procedure from a full ULURP to an authorization if you need any bulk mods on the receiving site, like if you need a little additional height on the receiving site to make it work, that would be an authorization. So it goes to community board and city planning commission. If you don't, if the site can accommodate those development rights without any changes to zoning at all, then it would just be a certification. You come to city planning and you get your stamp and you can do it. And they were just ecstatic because it provided an opportunity for them to sell these development rights that they've been sitting on, for millions of years, when they really need to find a way to either make some money or just apply for a demolition permit.
Right. You also mentioned about, being able to create a landmark, right? You also mentioned that you'll be working with different government agencies. Speaking specifically for CB3, we're trying to solidify a historic district. Now, would you actually would you work with the community board, the people, or with landmarks preservation? Because it's been a very hard battle trying to get them to acknowledge the specific spaces that we want. Specific area, there's only one that we're targeting right now, and it's been a really uphill battle. So are you, what part do you play in that, since you'll be kind of conducting between?
Yeah, city planning and zoning in general don't really play a part in historic districting. That's under the administrative law, and LPC takes the lead on it. We interact with LPC on all sorts of issues. But we are not the ones to create or decide where appropriate historic district is or not.
No, but what I'm saying is that what if a developer wants to build within this area that we want designated?
Well,
Understand the conflict there?
before it's designated, before it's designated, you don't have historic districting
Right,
protections.
right.
Afterwards, then, they have to go through LPC that has those
Right.
protections.
Okay.
Michelle, did you?
Oh, no, it was just about, I couldn't understand you saying P or B.
John?
Some question. Can you explain a little better how the slipper law would wind up affecting the large portions of the Lower East Side? So it would basically, a lot of the side streets, for example, would remain unaffected mostly, or
it depends on if there's new construction that was affordable.
Yeah, good question. So sliver law dates back to the early 80s, before we had height limits in the zoning at all. It was still the old 1961 town and park rezoning, where we were gonna like raise everything and do urban renewal projects on super blocks. So sliver law was a very limited way to say, if your lot is less than 45 feet in width, then we're imposing a height limit on it. And they were some of the first height limits anywhere in the city. Since that time, later in the 80s, we invented contextual zoning, quality housing zoning, that's zoning with actual height limits that were to create buildings that were intended to fit in better with the built context of New York City, since we weren't gonna bulldoze everything and do tower and park everywhere anymore. So since the 80s, we've rezoned huge swaths of New York City, including huge swaths of CB3, though no, of course not all of it. I live in R72 and CD3. So there are hard height limits on most parts of the city today. In areas where there are not hard height limits, there's the option, the contextual option that developers can opt into. It gives them a little more floor area, so developers tend to like to do that. It enables a more efficient building form, so developers tend to like to do that as well. Like building a tall, skinny building, you know, is typically not something anybody wants. So what we would do with Sliver is say, if you're in a contextual district with a hard height limit, or if you opt in to the contextual option with a hard height limit, then Sliver doesn't apply to you. You have your own height limits in the underlying zoning. If, however, you're in an R72, doesn't have a height limit, and you're not doing the contextual option, then Sliver would continue to apply to you. So basically, it provides a height limit where there are none, but it gets out of the way in areas where there already are height limits.
Okay, and you talked a little bit about communal housing, which sounds like a modern version of SROs. Where could those be built, basically? What are we talking about? Can you explain
We
that?
would enable shared housing throughout the city. I would say the core of the proposal is, there's some programs that HPD has been working on for the last 5 or 6 years. So regulatory agreement projects, 100% affordable projects are at the core. Since we started on this project though, we looked to other cities around the country that have been legalizing these sorts of arrangements, and they've worked pretty well. They've like filled some underserved niches for younger households, older households, indeed some marginally housed populations as well, kind of like old SRO model. And so we are kind of revisiting the ban on shared housing that we implemented in the 1950s. Kind of out of a spirit, it's in the housing blueprint, it's in Where We Live, out of prejudice and exclusion. The idea was people who live in SROs are kind of shady characters. If we eliminate SROs, then I guess those people will disappear. That's not how it has worked in practice, and in fact, it's been a contributor to our street homelessness issue. And I can say, as Asuka alluded to, there are existing informal shared housing arrangements in Community District 3. That we have been working with HPD and working with local nonprofits to try to legalize. We do not have any way to legalize them today. So a big part of our shared housing proposal and a big part of some of the changes to the G districts that Asuka mentioned is to enable us to formalize that housing in a way that protects these tenants instead of leaving them totally vulnerable, where they can't call 311 because it could lead to a vacate order or something like that.
Okay, I've got one more, sorry.
All right, so I have a follow-up for that.
I'll follow up, go ahead.
I mean, what prevents landlords from wanting to have communal housing? Because they can garner more rent if they piecemeal the apartment out room by room. I mean, what does the zoning provide for any sort of protection that would limit that? Because I could see, you know, a situation where there are lots of older adults who are struggling financially, and a situation like this is good. But it's not good if it's going to push landlords or incentivize them to take away housing that, you know, can house an entire family, which is also in need.
No, that's a great point. So our shared housing proposals would come with additional regulatory oversight. So yes, we want to provide a formal legal pathway to create shared housing. Yes, we also recognize that there are risks there. And so in conjunction with changes to the housing maintenance code, we will be implementing things like limits on number of bedrooms per bathroom, limit on number of bedrooms per refrigerator, management oversight using best practices from other parts of the country, because formal legal shared housing does raise management issues that you don't necessarily see if you're only renting out apartments, but.
Right, but I mean, I'm talking specifically about the pressure that that kind of housing can create on landlords, you know, in terms of, in our community, and convert the units that are intended for full families so that they can house, you know, individuals. So is there anything in the zoning that will create some kind of balance, not just oversight once it happens, but something prior to it to ensure that the rate of conversion is not outpacing the rate of the units that are being created for families?
Right, no, exactly. I mean, here's what we believe will happen. CD3 has a fair amount of informal shared housing. In fact, I was the foreman on a jury for a criminal case that involved a 1-bedroom on Henry that had been subdivided into 3 separate units, each of which had a family in it. So 1 bedroom was subdivided for 3 families. You know, it's you know, it's amazing. And so, you know, there are many parts of Community Board 3 that have situations like that. We believe that this will provide a legal pathway to formalize existing informal arrangements, but that given the economics of it, there will not be an incentive, and the additional oversight, there will not be an incentive to take an existing 2-bedroom and somehow turn it into a, you know, shared housing arrangement, or a 3-bedroom and turn it into a shared housing arrangement. So it's a way to fill niches in the housing market that take pressure off of those family units instead of like putting pressure on them.
Well, I would encourage the Department of City Planning to consider restrictions in allowing for only a limited amount of those units per building to ensure that there is a diversity of housing ranges available to our people. Because it's not a problem now, and it's not, everything is a, you know, conversion of existing once they existed, you know, they created. So, you know, maybe it's not now, but in a year, you know, somebody could have gone ahead and converted the apartment, and so now it's existing, now it has to be converted, and so forth and so on. You see what I-
Yeah, we're taking notes.
Got it.
I just, it's the time.
Just one.
All right, John has one, and then Trevor has a follow-up, and then I have a question. I don't know if there are other committee members, but after that, we'll go to the public. I just want to give you guys an update. We'll try to keep it quick, okay?
So you were talking about UAP and making some things easier for community housing groups to build stuff. And so we have several community housing groups in our board, and they're elsewhere in the city. Is there a way you can even relax it even more, to the zoning even more, to help these groups build out more and build more affordable units? Because they're the only ones who are truly dedicated towards building permanently affordable housing for people. And so, you know, a lot of times they have to deal with restrictions too. And I don't know, maybe Steve can speak to this more, but maybe if even more of the restrictions were lessened, so that they could actually build more of this permanently affordable housing that would actually really truly help people and keep people in neighborhood. Is there more that can be done than what you are doing, or has it been considered?
Yeah, I would say we're pushing the limits on what we can do for 100% affordable housing. For instance, it probably went by pretty fast, but we are proposing to exempt 100% affordable housing, that is regulatory agreement projects, from a lot of the administrative provisions in the zoning that are necessary to enforce when you have a privately financed fixed income development. What we found is that when 100% affordable developers have to comply with term sheet and subsidy agreements, and then they have to do all the zoning stuff too, that there can be conflicts, overlap, it just creates a lot of headaches. And in some cases, actually prevents things from happening. For instance, we've discovered that MIH basically does not work with 100% affordable home ownership. And so we are exempting all those 100% affordable regulatory agreement projects from the administrative headaches in the zoning that are intended to keep an eye on privately financed developments. And I think that's going to be a big thing for affordable developers. Secondly, We see what the housing opportunity proposal will do for the land market is similar to what our housing opportunity proposal will do for just housing opportunity generally for tenants. We expect that we're creating a lot of new sites for development opportunities that don't really exist today. The big guys are gonna go after the sites in the highest value neighborhoods. And we think it's going to free up a lot of the land market in, some of the other neighborhoods around the city for your nonprofit developers, for your smaller developers and your mom and pops. And so we're really hoping that we don't get to talk about that much because we're typically not talking to developers, we're talking to tenants, residents, but that's what we expect housing opportunity to do for that, and we've been working with AMHD on that.
Yeah, I mean, that would obviously be key and be good to understand exactly how it's working between different organizations and how there'll be funding available for people, because again, this is really one of the most certain ways to lock these kinds of things in.
Agree completely. I would say some of our closest, I've talked to, like Oscar said, I've talked to over 100 different stakeholders over the last year or so, but some of our closest collaborators are folks from AMHD and New York Housing Conference, NYSAPA, like the affordable housing developers who know where the obstacles are and know what they need, and we're definitely trying to accommodate them as much as we can.
Great.
All right, thank you. So
Just
Trevor has a
some
question.
clarification, and the mayor's already touched on this. But, when they talk about building units, most of them are studios now. They're coming online, and then we say we have X amount of units built, but they're really studios or lounge and dorm houses, communal housing. And you mentioned that you're gonna change the size or the minimum size of these apartments that are APD. What is that minimum size now going to look like, or where do you propose it?
Gotcha. In Manhattan today, the dwelling unit factor, which is a minimum average unit size, is 680, which translates into like an average apartment size of about 680 square feet. So that basically prohibits you from doing developments that are full of, studios or small one bedrooms today. In New York City's past, that's been a pretty important and valuable source of housing for, folks just coming to town, for older households, again, for some marginally housed folks. But we basically outlawed it. I remember we looked back in the zoning, like, why did we do this? Like, why did we think that zoning should enforce a minimum average unit size? It doesn't really look like land use regulation. And I found a report, and the commissioner said, we have to prevent Manhattan from being overrun by stewardesses. I swear to God, I can send it to you. There was concern that there were some buildings where it was just like all stewardesses living there. And so we need to, make sure that New York City isn't overrun by stewardesses. At this day and age, we think that minimum unit size can be controlled by other bodies of law, like Housing Maintenance Code, like Building Code, like Americans with Disabilities Act, that mandate a minimum unit size of probably in the 400 some range. Our analysis, we're excited about the idea of more small units in central locations. It can take pressure off of family-sized units elsewhere in the city. Our discussions and our analysis show that it's actually not going to unleash the market. Like in Manhattan, people build, 1-2 bedroom apartments, and they will continue to do it after this. However, it will create some opportunities on the margin for some of those throwback projects, where it's full of no-frill studios for people just moving to town for the first time, and we'll be excited to see those when they come.
Okay, and the last one is, you mentioned on one of those slides, which you flew by pretty quickly, that you would like to change waterfront development to as a right. Now, looking at that slide, it didn't really make any sense, so I'm just curious as to what that means.
Here's what's going on there. So waterfront zoning, which is kind of shorthand for zoning in special districts or waterfront access plans along the waterfront. Community District 3, I don't believe has any of those. It has some large scales, but it doesn't have any waterfront access plans or special districts along the waterfront. The envelopes that we had created for those areas in the past, didn't work for affordable housing. And so what would happen is that if you're doing a Bronx Point, or if you're doing a North Cove in Inwood, or if you're doing some of the Greenpoint Williamsburg stuff, developers would have to come back for a ULURP and special approvals and everything like that in order to build anything on those sites. We thought that it's much better, saves time, saves money, gets more housing online quicker if we actually create a workable set of envelopes that you can use if you're building affordable housing on the waterfront. You can use if you're doing mixed income on the waterfront, so that you don't have to come back begging to city planning in order to make something work. So that's the main thrust there.
All right, so we're gonna move to.
I have one question.
I also have just one question.
All right, I'm just gonna let Susan ask a quick question.
Yeah, this is really quick, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but this is going back to the families. We're losing families here because they cannot afford to stay, that's why our schools are losing seats. So both preserving but creating affordable for families is really important to maintain our community.
I agree with you completely. I was remiss, I didn't mention, affordable housing will continue to have bedroom mix requirements. So if you're doing UAP, or if you're doing MIH, or if you're doing a regulatory agreement project, you are still subject to bedroom mix requirements, at least 50% two bedroom and above, for those. So we're not proposing to eliminate, minimum unit size and things like that for affordable specifically, for the reason you mentioned.
All right, Adriana and then Steve.
That was Michelle.
Huh, Michelle?
Oh, thank you. Thank you guys for coming. This is very helpful. Will you be coming back to our future meetings to help us with our analysis as we learn more?
Yeah, we'd love to.
I think, we have done the presentation itself and in terms of overview. The next really step is if you have questions, we would love to get those questions in writing. So, through Susan or Carl, and then that tells us like, okay, if we can respond in writing and like clarify anything, we'd look at that. If you really are like one that's here for a conversation, that's really specific, we're happy to chat as well.
I'll say I would like you here. Great. I'm not the chair, but I would like you here. Thank you.
I love coming here. I'm a Hellman resident, so I'm just down the street. Got my family over there. That's a.
You made a big mistake by saying us all that.
Yeah, which building?
Clear where you're at, John, please. All right, are you answering any other questions? If not, then let's let Steve go so we can allow folks from the public to speak.
Okay, yeah, just a quick question. Since you mentioned dwelling unit factor changes, I'm wondering about any change to lot coverage ratios in like higher density districts, or like in this community where it's typically like 70%.
Love it. Yeah, we're getting in the weeds. So we are proposing certain changes to things like lot coverage, changes to certain yard requirements, changes to window to lot line. And we're doing this for really exciting reasons. So back in 1961, we imposed things like a 30-foot rear yard requirement. When contextual zoning came along, we proposed like fairly tight lot coverage maximums in a way that basically today only enable double loaded corridors. I don't know if folks know what that is or not.
Can you explain it to people?
You have one corridor with apartments on either side of it. It's like a big block, and one corridor with apartments on either side. Because of that, most apartments only have one exposure. So you have windows on one side. You don't have, windows in your kitchen. You don't have windows in your bathroom. And so it's crazy, like more recent housing can feel like lower quality than like Hillman. I have a window in my bathroom. I have a window in my kitchen. It's amazing. And so we were proposing to do things like relaxed lot coverage, relaxed window to lot line, relaxed yards to enable older style apartments. Like maybe you can have an interior courtyard. You can have apartments with windows on both sides. Your kitchen can have a window again. Your bathroom can have a window again. And so this is one small example of the way that these proposals look to New York City's past to see types of buildings that have worked really well in the past, but that we have rendered illegal today. And so that also holds for things like the town center proposal, 2, 3, 4 stories of residential above a commercial ground floor. Everybody loves that. And we made it illegal. And so looking backwards to that building type that we made illegal in 1960s and bringing it back. And this is another example of that.
So we're gonna get another remake of Rear Window, basically?
All right, I'm just gonna pull us back because of time. Do we have any other committee members that have questions? I have a question. And I have held it to the end. So you talked about universal affordability, and then you also talked a little bit, so my question is a two-parter, about infill. And so the issue with infill, or what I'd like you to speak to is, so we're looking at the entire city and we're looking at large campuses, but let's address the elephant in the room. Most of the large campuses in New York City, where there's housing, belongs to public housing. Right, they're built on super blocks, they were built in the old style of tower in the park, there's lots of land. So while we are looking at this entire citywide zoning text change, and we're looking at where a large impact is gonna be, I really want to, for folks to understand that as a citywide proposal, a change, this is major. It is major. So I don't know that you elaborated on how, so the zoning will, what incentives will be available for developers that may want to build infill to include affordable housing? Is it a mandate that will be there? Is it just universal affordability? What, because I know that in past discussions, you all have mentioned, because we mentioned how the Housing Authority and HUD will still have control over the sites. But that's just the disposition of the land. That's not to negotiate what gets built like ULURP gives us now. I mean, not that it's a completely adequate tool, but at least we have that tool, right? And right now, any site that would want to go before the city or would be considered a building site would have to go one by one, which would mean that there would be plenty of public engagement. So talk to us a little bit about what this process, how this would impact residents' ability to engage, to negotiate, to stop these things if they don't want them, and also to include things like, or to mandate affordable housing be included in every project.
Thank you, that's a great question.
So the way that it works today,
Yeah, I was telling Val, I've been in city planning about 10 years. I think I worked on dozens of mayoral zoning overrides for NYCHA in particular. And so the way it works today is if NYCHA wants to do something and zoning gets in the way, as it almost always does on town and park campuses, they go to the deputy mayor and they go to the law department and they do this mayoral zoning override process. It typically enables them to do things like 100% affordable senior on an empty parking lot. I'm thinking of things like Betances in the Bronx, or there's some downtown Brooklyn projects that did a similar thing, where you're building the new senior buildings for the seniors who might be alone in a 3-bedroom apartment or whatever. They move to a new unit and then you've got a new 3-bedroom and you can lease out to somebody on the family that's been on the waiting list for 8 years or whatever. So over the course of that process, we've said it's nuts that we force NYCHA to go through 2 years of process with respect to zoning to build these 100% affordable projects. And so, well, yes, they still have to go through the HUD approval process. They still have to go through the resident consultation process. We didn't want to be an obstacle in the way of these types of projects. And so in terms of protections as to what type of things would get developed on NYCHA campuses after infill, I just want to say this too. These proposals are for, I would say, a broader range of sites with existing buildings, not just the big campuses, the 1.5 acres and above. We're also talking about faith-based churches and faith-based organizations across the city. I work very closely with them. Other types of housing or community facility spaces. And so if we are concerned about protections that NYCHA developments need, we should probably work with NYCHA leadership.
But the zoning, all due respect, the zoning is setting parameters right now. Because I was here 10 years ago in 2013, when the Housing Authority proposed 8 development sites across New York City, 5 of which were in this community. All right, part of the challenges and some of the things that gave us some level of protection at the time was the need for a city process. If we completely eradicate that process and make it easy for NYCHA to circumvent in some way, or for the city, so NYCHA will consult with us, but doesn't the city have an obligation to consult with its residents too, outside of the agency?
Right. Yeah, I mean, Chair Garodnick from City Planning is actually meeting with NYCHA tenant leadership, I believe, next week.
Well, there's one of those NYCHA tenant leaders, yeah.
Yeah, and we were just talking with NYCHA Real Estate and NYCHA Strategic Planning last week as well. We're trying to work carefully with them to make sure that we can fully support any outcomes of this process as well.
But you do realize that the housing authority's goals are not always the same as the people who reside in the
Right, yeah, you
buildings,
said
right?
2013, that's why, we're
Okay.
making sure that we're hitting the tenant leadership as well. It's not enough to go to, Lisa Boat Hyatt or whatever, we wanna go to the tenants as well to hear them out. All I'm saying is that if we are concerned about NYCHA, we don't wanna get overly restrictive there because it affects like all the churches who are gonna be really upset if they lose the ability to do this as well. So.
It doesn't have to be a one size fits all.
Right, exactly, that's kind of what I'm saying. But we are just trying to work as closely with various power structures at NYCHA and with various other stakeholders to ensure that we get to a good place on this. In my 10 years, I've only seen 100% affordable projects. I wasn't around for the Bloomberg administration, where there was an idea that we were gonna do a bunch of market rate on there to generate revenue streams.
It was gonna have affordable housing also, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not just about that. It's about what the influx of these developments do to a community that is already ridden in poverty and has a lot of issues. We want things like stores that serve our residents, we want jobs, I mean, I know this is not your thing, I don't wanna do that, I'm sorry, it
No.
triggers me, NYCHA triggers me, I'm sorry, forgive me. I don't wanna take up any more time, I would like for us to move on.
No,
I can
hear
always
you.
talk to you more, the proposal is available, there'll be other sessions where we can dig in a little bit more deep, for the sake of time,
Yeah,
yes.
one more thing though, but the only additional development capacity on a NYCHA campus, for instance, would be UAP, so it would be for 100% affordable housing. It tends to be the case.
But that's optional, right? It's not.
Right, it's sort of like, if you wanna do anything more than you can do today, it has to be 100% affordable. So a principle here is we're not taking anything away from people. If you have something today, we're not taking it away from you. But anything we're adding on top is 100% affordable, and that holds for the NYCHA campuses too.
So let me just understand, any building then that is built has to be 100% affordable? In the infill, no, right?
Anything that goes above the market rate max for the site,
But that's not the, right, I understand, that's a different financial concern.
Yeah.
That's not the concern that we have, right?
yeah, but it's
The
not.
concern we have is that there'll be none, so they can build to the limit and not include anything,
Yeah,
that's
right.
pretty easy to do.
We can't mandate 100%
And profitable,
affordable in the zoning, but because it's publicly owned land, various exercises of political power have ensured that when NYCHA doesn't build recently, it's been 100%
I get it,
affordable.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna move us on, so
Yes, okay.
Anisha has a question and then we can move on to the public.
So zoning always sort of catches up later with like trends and markets and trends of cities and all of these things, and it's sort of this like fixed set of parameters. And so, I was wondering if there were any projections that you've done about the potential of number of affordable housing units that are going to be built, and whether there's enough city subsidy that actually matches that. Because affordable housing is not just built, it's a city's investment through, incentives, other resources. There's been swirls for how many years about city budget, about housing resources, about HPD. And this potential is really, I think it's great in the sense that like, if we're gonna change our zoning, it should incentivize more affordable housing. The biggest thing that struck me out of your entire presentation was that we have a very low vacancy rate. We obviously need more housing supply, but if so many of our community members are rent burdened, the affordable housing actually really doesn't matter. And so it's fine to enable it, but we probably need the additional incentive to actually make it happen. We also don't have very many sites in CD3 for new construction of housing. I think we did this analysis with the borough president's office multiple times over the past few years. So like, really, what are we talking about here?
Right, so, to build anything, whether it's mixed income, whether it's market rate, whether it's 100% affordable, the zoning has to allow it. And so, these zoning changes would enable more of every type of housing. UAP, obviously, that's our affordable housing workforce, and like I said, projects tens of thousands, probably on the order of 20,000 or so income restricted.
How many years?
10 to 15 years. So, but we're talking tens of thousands of units To put that into scale, all of our inclusionary programs since 1987 have created, I think, around 12,000 total. So this will just blow that out of the water in its first decade. And that does not include HPD's 100% affordable portfolio. This is just what UAP would create on the margin. It doesn't include units that are coming through subsidy. Agree with you completely. In fact, I couldn't agree with you more. Like, most people don't realize that to build affordable housing, you really do need a capital budget, or you need tax incentives, or you need some external means of financial support. Back to Oscar's zoning slide, zoning, we can kind of provide some encouragement, but we do not finance housing ourselves. But the agency I work with most closely is HPD, and we are doing everything we can in this zoning to remove obstacles to things like 100% affordable home ownership, which zoning has made really, really tough in recent years. Things like new affordable housing in low density areas that don't enable multifamily today. We will create opportunities for affordable home ownership and even affordable rental in low density districts for the first time in decades. UAP, and then again, creating opportunities for 100% affordable subsidized neighborhoods across the city as well. So without a doubt, this is the biggest thing the city has done for affordable housing like ever.
It would help your pitch if you said something like that.
Okay, definitely.
All right, so we have somebody online, and I asked you all to sign up to speak, so please come up. We have one and sign up to speak, so then I can call you in that order. In the meantime, what we'll do is we'll go to a question from someone who is online. So David Gordon, and David's question is? We're gonna let you talk, David. So we're gonna ask folks to keep it down while they're signing up to speak. Thank you. David, you can speak. Are you there? Maybe David's gone. Okay.
No, he's unmuted himself, so.
Okay, so David? We can't hear you. Can you type it in the chat? Perhaps, okay, you did, okay.
Well, you can.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is David. I'm a member, I'm a constituent of Community Board 3. Thank you so much for your presentation today. It was really informative. So I want to thank the speakers earlier and everything. And I just wanted to say that I highly support the City of Yes's objectives here. And I think that all of the platforms that they've put out are worth pursuing. And I really hope that Community Board 3 supports it in its entirety.
All right, thank you for your comments, David. We're gonna take a speaker from the audience next, and that's what we'll do. We'll do a speaker from the audience that is present, and then a speaker from the audience that is online. And the next person, this is for the next issue, thank you.
Yeah.
Is Harrison Cole. Are you here, Harrison?
Yes.
You have a question? You have 2 minutes, Harrison, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to express my support generally for the City of Yes as a budget, or as a proposal and legislation. But more specifically, I wanted to address the item of minimum unit sizes and the shared living spaces, as I think that that's going to be a great help to New York City to pass these. As somebody who doesn't cook all that often, and somebody who just moved to New York and doesn't have a family living in an apartment that has, you know, a kitchen, all of these spaces, I would be somebody who's happy to live in one of these shared spaces to save money as a young professional. But instead, because these are illegal, because there's these minimum sizes, I live in an apartment that might not be the best suited for me, and taking up an apartment with a kitchen for people that really need it, people with families. So by allowing these units, allowing these shared spaces, I might have lived in a different place for myself, and freeing up some space for these families that do need these 2 bedrooms. And you know, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. All right, our next speaker is Nancy Kong. Hi, Nancy.
She was going back and forth to the,
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
You might have to.
Thanks for the presentation. It was a lot. So I'm really trying to learn and understand the impact. And I live in an area that is kind of split up by 3 districts, 1, 2, and 3. And so while my question, it may not be as relevant to CB3, I'm actually worried about the infill. And what I really would want to understand is the potential adaptive reuse of converting the commercial space into affordable living arrangements. And I thought it was a no-brainer when I first heard about it, right? But then I've talked to people and they said it was prohibitive, expensive. So I wanted to ask, like, what incentives are there to have the current landlords or developers utilize vacant office space? What I'm worried about also as somebody living and wanting to age in place in New York City is that real estate boom plummet is potentially happening as business leases come up and businesses are not going to renew their space. Those office buildings will be completely vacant and with no lease. So those, to me, like, what other incentives in addition to what you have provided, or maybe explain it so that I understand it better? Thank you.
That's an absolutely great question. So like Oscar pointed out, we love our adaptive reuse regs. They already apply in Community District 3. We're proposing to expand them citywide. We're proposing to move the cutoff date from 1961 all the way up to 1991. And we're proposing to enable conversion to the full range of housing types, including shared housing, including supportive housing, including dorms, things like that. What incentives exist outside the zoning? We are so excited to say that somehow Albany passed a tax benefit for conversions that will require 25% set aside for affordable housing. So as much as we love our existing adaptive reuse regs, the one blemish is the fact that conversions today don't result in affordable housing. Under this tax benefit, word on the street is that developers are going to use it. It will require 25% set aside for affordable housing. And the faster they move, the more valuable the tax benefit will be to them. So they get a bigger benefit if they commence construction by 2026, less if by 2027, even less if by 2028. So we expect this to be a game changer in the adaptive reuse world. Yes, it's not feasible for most office buildings to convert to residential, but a not insignificant portion can, and the tax incentive will help an even greater portion do that with a set aside for affordable housing.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to circumvent real quick, just to, in the spirit of giving a courtesy to our chair, she has a question.
Thank you, very brief.
The chair of the community board.
Yeah, thank you, very, very brief. I'm just wondering, maybe this is part of special districts, or maybe you've spoken to DCLA about this, but I'm curious if you've looked at any models for artist housing, whether that be like a Mitchell law, like Manhattan Plaza, or Peaceful MI.
For that, I almost have to refer you to the law department because.
Okay, I get what you're getting at.
Yeah, gotcha. We.
The public is.
Yeah, right, yeah, it's legally tricky issue.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, thank you. So, do we have another question online? Juan Rivero, are you there? You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, I am.
Ask your question or make your comment.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm Juan Rivero from Village Preservation, and I would like to express our concern with several parts of your proposal. Generally speaking, this proposal is premised on the notion that a general housing supply shortage is the root cause of the affordable housing crisis, and that an increase in market rate housing can address this problem, when in fact, the problem is a shortage of affordable housing and not housing in general. So the affordability problem is not best solved by lifting the floodgates to market residential development through incentives. But more specifically, we have issues with several provisions. We oppose lifting the allowable size and height of purely market rate residential development in contextual zoning districts in Manhattan Community Boards 1 through 8. We oppose lifting the allowable size and height of purely market rate residential development in current voluntary inclusionary housing zones, including those in the East Village and the Lower East Side, since doing so would eliminate an existing incentive to produce affordable housing. We oppose allowing the transfer of development rights from individually designated landmarks over an expanded area and with greatly reduced public review. We have repeatedly asked DCP for a more comprehensive information about the extent and geography of air right transfer allowances, but have yet to receive it. And pending further clarification that we also have requested but not received, we oppose the extensive special provisions to allow more market rate housing in what the proposal calls campuses. We would like to understand what counts as a campus in CB3 and how the changes would affect development on those sites. As a whole, we find that the listed provisions would, in their current formulation, increase out of context luxury development in our neighborhoods without significantly addressing the problem of housing affordability. Thank you.
Great. Great, thank you so much for your comments, Juan Rivera. Do you have any thing that you'd like to respond?
Sure, just quickly, if people have any doubts whatsoever that the housing shortage, that 1.41 net rental vacancy rate, which is the lowest since 1968, is leading to rising rents, gentrification, displacement, overcrowding, homelessness, don't take our word for it. Please seek a second opinion from any academic institute, any nonprofit housing group that specializes in housing research. I personally would not look towards organizations that have nothing to do with housing research for answers to that question. I would go, but I do encourage you guys to look to other groups that work in this area.
Alex Schwartz and Professor Moore published an article just a few months ago talking about how there is not a housing crunch nationwide and pointing to the glut of excess stock. I can share a link with it with you if you like. But beyond that, there is the fact that over the past 30 years, the number of residential permits has ranged from 5,000 to 55,000 without having any discernible impact on the vacancy rates or housing burden in the city.
Again, I encourage you, yes, you can find a professor in Australia who thinks
at the new school of New York. I'm sorry.
All right, I'm gonna take control here, thank you.
Can I finish?
Yes, we're not gonna have cross-talking and argument. So Juan, we really appreciate your comments, thank you. I encourage you to submit those comments to DCP and to the community board, but we're going to put you on mute to allow for John to respond. If you want us to come back to you, raise your hand again, thank you.
Yeah, so please, second opinions. It is not an exaggeration to say that there is consensus on this from any academic institutions that specialize in housing research. Harvard Joint Center, Furman Center, Turner Center, University of California, any nonprofits that specialize in housing research, consensus. Look to them. Don't look to groups that have nothing to do with housing research. Second, landmark TDRs. Village preservation, you're supposed to be a preservation organization. We are trying to create a tool.
We're not gonna do that.
We are trying to create a tool. Just want to support landmark TDRs. We are trying to create a tool to support.
Just stop, everybody, please, all right?
We are trying to create a tool to support struggling landmarks across this city. Churches with their roofs caving in. What could be more preservationist than trying to help landmarks like that? I cannot believe that they're opposed to this.
Well, you know, I do want to say that it is this community and this our body's job to raise their concern, their objections, their approval. You know, this is what this forum is for. And as a city agency and as officials from the city, I hope that you all can understand that we in this community have endured many challenges. And we are a community that is passionate about this issue in many ways. And we are not a community that does not go down fighting when necessary, but we also know how to work well. So, we don't always agree, but we respect each other, and in this space, we will not be talking poorly about each other. Thank you very much. Now, the next person up is Valentina Jones. Thank you, Valentina.
Two questions. Two questions. One, in terms of the campus infill that's on the paper, can that be used for NYCHA? Can that be used at NYCHA? Because previously, I think she said 2013, NYCHA had an infill thing and quite a few down here did not want it, so.
Yeah, the proposed allowances for infill would work for NYCHA campuses, Mitchell Marma campuses, limited housing dividend corporation campuses, church campuses, any large site with old height factor buildings on it, it would help them.
Okay, so you'll probably get a letter from me about this from, I'm here representing Lower East Side Power Partnership. My other issue is affordability, okay? I'm a nurse. I remember at one time, one of these things about affordability, I asked, well, what is affordable? When you talk about how much do you make and how much do you pay for rent, it was like the people made less than I did and had to pay more than I did. As a nurse, I could tell you there was a point, because I work pretty close to where I live, that it was like constantly I was the person asked to come in and do overtime or stay and do overtime. So I asked some of these nurses, like, what's the issue here? The problem was they couldn't find something affordable down here. So are you going to look towards some affordability for like nurses and teachers and people that work in the community?
So Val, are you asking about higher AMIs or are you asking about lower AMIs? So our UAP proposal would create affordable housing at an average of 60% AMI. Averaging enables you to hit 30%, which is about $1,000 a month for a new 2-bedroom. 60% is about $2,000 a month for a new 2-bedroom. 90% is about $3,000 a month for a new 2-bedroom. I don't know what income range you're looking at.
Can you add those income ranges to what you just said, though?
The
30%,
presentation.
80%, that income range is about.
There's a slide.
But it's an average, actually, right?
Just so people understand what that means, income.
Right.
the number.
So.
With the AMIs.
I mean, I understand that. I think all
All right, I
I'm saying.
just want to be clear about the time. It's 8:20. We still have another
Right,
issue. No, I'm not trying to stop you.
Val.
Valentina, I'm not trying to stop you from.
Well, no, I'm
asking
done.
a
I mean,
question.
that, you know what, like I said, I work at Mount Sinai Baptist Unit, my whole unit went down to Bennington House. I will ask them about this when I see these incomes, because I have to say that previously they were saying that this was, when I looked at it, I was like, yeah, I understand why y'all don't live in Manhattan. And they're asking me to walk the world on a regular.
30% AMI for family of 3, about $42,000 a year. 60% AMI.
I'll go down there and ask them what they make,
Yeah.
and at some point you will get a letter from me, but I will ask them
That's great.
what they.
And the cap for UAP is 100% AMI. You could not do units above 100% AMI. I got yelled at Manhattan Community Board 4 last night because they want higher AMIs than that for middle income folks. We don't hear that often, but you know.
All right, so for the sake of time, I just want to be clear, there are still 6 speakers. So, and we still have another issue. Is EDC still with us?
They're swapped out waiting.
Okay, all right, great. Sorry, and thank you, EDC, for your patience, but I'm sure you understand this is a major issue. So we're gonna go, thank you, Valentina, for that question. And John, when possible, let's try to like keep the answers down to like 30 seconds, a minute if you can, get to the meat of it. We can always follow up with all the juicy stuff later. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so we're gonna go to the next person, which is Adele. Adele, are you there? Adele Loomis?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Adele, please try to keep your comments as brief as possible so everybody gets a chance to speak. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. I just wanted to say thank you and express really enthusiastic support for this. I think it's super important to do everything we can to create more housing. There's no question that housing, that the prices that we're seeing are a reflection of how we haven't built enough housing up until this point. So really appreciate this proposal as a way of bringing more housing online, and hope it will help families like mine stay in New York and raise our families. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Adele. All right, so I don't think there's a need for a response there, so we'll go to the next speaker that's present, and that is Marion Regal. Rydell. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I had not seen yet or heard of the presentation about, there's envelopes, and I don't know exactly what you meant by that, for building waterfront properties. I live on Grand Street. We have had our whole park torn apart because of coastal, let me finish, please. Coastal resilience. The whole downtown horn of Manhattan and many parts of uptown are suffering from coastal resilience. So I would like to know how you're managing, how the envelopes are managing those things. The thought of having high rises along this park that supposedly have been, this is a whole other story, but it really worries me. We lost electricity. We're 5 blocks from the river. The people at the river all lost. They got flooded. They lost electricity. High rise is not the answer, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm on Hillman on Grand, way over by the river too, so I hear you. The waterfront envelopes are not really relevant to Community District 3 because it's like parkland all along, or like FDR. So those are really for places of parts of the city where there's privately owned land right up to the waterfront. So like your Bronx Point, your Inwoods, your Greenpoint Williamsburg waterfront, but it's not really relevant down here.
Can I just very quickly, there's still coastal resilience issues.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, those are like DPR stuff.
Okay.
So less relevant to these proposals is all I'm saying.
Great, thank you for your comments. All right, our next speaker is Laurel Travers. Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. I wanted to make a comment and also ask a question. The comment, I wanted to push back on the need for more housing. Since 2010, there's been almost twice as many additional housing units in New York City added, and only to the number of people. There's over 300,000 additional new units and only 150,000 people. So the idea that we have less and less housing is actually not true. And the rent still went up. So that's my comment. My question is, why don't we require developers to build 20% of their units at 60% of AMI without giving them a 20% bump in size? That's my question.
John, please.
Great question. Why not just keep buildings at the current size and overlay an affordability mandate on that? The answer there is, the whole point of this proposal is to create more housing to address, the housing shortage. I respectfully disagree that there's not a housing shortage. It shows up in all the data and we feel it every day. If you just impose a mandate on housing as it exists today, you actually make it harder to produce housing. Affordable mandates are expensive. And if you're not providing more opportunity, or if you're not providing some external means of financial support, then you make it harder to provide, you get less of it, and then you make the housing shortage worse. So doing as Laura Travers suggests would actually be counterproductive to our goal to enable a lot more housing to address the housing shortage. And so that's why we're not taking that approach.
Thank you, John. All right, so we have another question. Is it this person? Yeah. Okay, so a question texted by Frank Avila Goldman, which is with regards to subsidized housing on the LES and the city of Yes, does this proposal reduce the distance requirement between existing buildings and new developments? I couldn't recall the slide on the 40 feet distance, and if this proposal reduces or increases the area between.
Great question. Yes, these proposals propose to harmonize the local or New York City distance between buildings regulations with the state multiple dwelling law. That means reducing from 60 feet to 40 feet below a height of 125 feet. It would remain 80 feet above 125 feet. And so if you reduce the distance between buildings, you create some opportunities for infill where it can be very difficult today.
Thank you. All right, we have one other question, from Lisa Kaplan. Lisa, can you hear us? Are you there?
I can. Yes, I am.
Thank you for
Hello.
joining, Lisa.
Thank you for having me. I'm a little concerned and about although I understand the motivation behind the 60% average AMI requirement, it just seems tremendously hard to oversee. So, as someone who did rent up of affordable housing for years, it seems very optimistic to think that over time, somebody is going to be looking at the average income of all of the subsidized residents in order to keep an average. Can you talk a little bit about how that's going to happen?
Yeah, I wanna, thank you for that question, Lisa. Actually, I wanna add on to that, which is in general, right? There's a lot that you talked about, you know, including the apartments and the average and things that will be put in place. Who's gonna monitor? How is all this what is gonna be the oversight to ensure that the application of these changes is as was intended?
Great questions. First, on the affordable units. So when we're working with HPD to build on the existing administration for IH units on this, when affordable units get created, they have an AMI attached that remains attached to that unit for all time. It goes in a restrictive declaration that gets recorded against the property so that you can look it up at any point in the future if you need to enforce. It lease up, anytime that unit vacates and gets re-leased up through the lottery, it has to be with a qualifying household that is a household of the appropriate AMI over time. I have heard of enforcement difficulties around rent stabilization units, obviously, sometimes enforcement difficulties around pure 421A units. We have not had a hard time enforcing affordable units created through the zoning. And so we do not anticipate problems enforcing that over time here as well. And so who's gonna monitor? HPD is the primary enforcement agency there. They're streamlining their procedures around this, learning from the lessons of the past couple decades. So they're the main ones. In most instances, DOB will be a partner in that enforcement, but HPD takes the lead. And as I said, they've done a great job, and I'm not aware of any problems enforcing against affordable units created through the zoning as opposed to rent stabilization or as opposed to.
Well, you know, we don't judge the efficacy of things based on just one result.
No, I hear you.
Right, so, thank you for that. So, we don't have any more comments, any more questions, but I do wanna thank the Department of City Planning. And I wanna thank John and, Oscar, right, for coming here, and for doing all this work on this proposal. Please note that you can still comment, encourage your friends and your neighbors to comment. Please look at the materials, please go to a meeting near you, please stay in touch with this issue, because if you're not, your input won't be counted. So, and they wanna hear it, you know, they wanna hear it. I know John for, I don't know, like 20 years, right? And they wanna hear it, so, thank you. And so I think, with that being said, the information on how to submit your comments should be available online. The presentations should be available online, and thank you again.
Thank you so much, Tamara.
The last
Like
time.
there's some follow-up after.
No, it's not follow. The last time City Planning was here, we had, George James come in, because the devil's in the details.
That's
No
right.
one's gonna read all this text.
That's right.
Except for Lisa Kaplan's. But is there someone coming to help us?
Yes, we're gonna talk about all that business at the end, but
I
maybe
just
we
wanted
won't
to-
have no time. Great, that's a good point. So we do have our own consultant that is reviewing and is also a zoning professional with many years of experience and has been hired by many community boards across the city. So we have every trust and faith in his ability. He has already advised us on previous parts of this, the city of Yes. He is preparing an analysis for us. We will hopefully be coming back next month to present those findings so that folks have both the city's interpretation of it and another interpretation of it, for folks, you know, so that we can ensure that everybody has all the information they need before they make their comments. But if you are very clear about your comments, feel free to make them now too. Right, we don't ever want, yes, John?
And we can come to that one as well. I was at a meeting with.
The meetings are public and you can come to any meeting.
I was at a meeting with CB one.
And you're a resident too, right?
Yeah, with George just last week too, and we were able to answer some of his questions. We met with him multiple times to try to help him understand what's going on. He's not quite there yet, but if we're there too, then we can answer the questions.
Okay, I'll say it would be especially great if you come in landmarks.
Okay. So yes, George, and DCP can surely come, and be here for sure. It's a public meeting and we welcome all of the support we can get. And we would like for all of you to come back too and ask your questions. So we only have a few more minutes and we really want to go to EDC. Remember, next month, there's a presentation here at the next meeting from George James. DCP will be here. The information is on the website. How to comment is on the website. But we're gonna move on to EDC, and who's here from EDC? Raymond? Who's here?
Gigi's here.
Gigi.
And we also have, I think it's Andrew from Takati.
All right, great. So.
Oh,
All right, so hi, Gigi. How are you?
Hi, Damaris. How are you?
Good, I'm doing well. And A. Schwartz, I don't know your first name.
It's Andrew.
Andrew, okay, so who?
I'm with DSA, representing DSA, the developer. for
Okay.
Essex Crossing.
And John? What was the question?
John Raymond and PJ Berger from the EDC real estate team.
All right, great. All right, so why don't you take it away? Are you presenting? Are you starting? Gigi, is it you?
So there's two topics you asked to be addressed this evening. One is on the future of the Market Line space, and that would be Andrew. And then the future of Site 9 would be EDC. So which one would you like to begin with?
It's up to you all, whoever wants to go first.
All right, Andrew, why don't you start?
Okay. So regarding the Market Line at Site 2, which was under the Essex Street Market, we all know that the market is closed now and has been shuttered for a couple months now. The developer owner is currently evaluating what kind of other options might be a good fit in the space, both for the project and obviously the community. It's very initial conversations. We've hired an outside retail broker to help to gauge interest across a wide swath of potential uses. But it's very early and there hasn't been any real concrete interest to report on so far.
Okay. So Gigi, do you wanna, does anybody have any questions for Andrew? Yeah?
Andrea.
I have Andrea, Trevor, and Michelle. In that order.
Okay, so thank you for being here. I just wanted to understand what the developer's commitment was to the Market Line.
Oh, you have to
Can you hear me now?
press the button on the bottom.
Yeah.
I think I understood the question.
Can you hear me better now? I wanted to ask about what the developer's understanding was of their commitment to the Market Line.
Sure. And thanks for having me. And I've been on board at Essex since August now. So thanks for inviting me to the meeting. And so the obligation was to run the food hall and to try to make it work. The owners or the developer, for a myriad of factors, lost, it was not financially viable, and continued to lose money year after year, including the upfront capital investment. Obviously it was an unfortunate situation, but I think, due to COVID, the office space, the office market and not having occupied office space, but it just, and the vendors also were not making money. So the obligation was to try to make the food hall work. Unfortunately, it didn't, and that really is unfortunate, but hopefully Market Line 2.0 will be something even better. But what that's going to be, nobody knows at this point.
All right, I have just a follow-up question and comment, if that's okay, Damaris.
Yes.
So yeah, the community the developer had made a promise to keep this going for 15 years. And so, the next sort of step here is, my understanding is that EDC needs to approve the next phase of use. So we'd like to know if you will be looking for CB3 input.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, I'm speaking, I haven't spoken to the other partners or owners, but given that it's a public facing space and it's integral to the community, I would think that the community board would like to hear what we're planning for the space.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. Trevor?
So I'll be quick. I mean, the model has changed for food halls and for sort of indoor restaurant space, especially in that particular area where the office market is basically plummeted. What does that say for the future of the space in, going forward? Because if the bottom can fail, I can see the top failing also, because you don't have that strong office market. You intended to get the breakfast, the lunch, and after work. So what do you see for the future of the hall as going forward?
Right. So the Essex Street Market, and I think this is another part of the confusion about why the food hall underneath didn't work, right, is a separate entity that's run and owned by the city, not the developer. So the market and the financial viability and how it's doing, I don't have any information on. I don't know, Gigi, if you want to comment on Essex Street Market at all.
I'm
I
sorry.
think that was the question,
What was the question about Essex Street Market?
how it's doing, or,
Essex Street Market is doing very well. It is the most successful public market within our markets portfolio.
Yes. Can you fix the Wi-Fi there?
I will take that comment back and let them know.
There today does not work.
Go ahead, next question.
All right, okay. So actually, there are committee members still. Michelle?
Yes, thank you, Damaris. Thank you guys for being here tonight. You can hear me?
Can you hear Michelle?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, sorry, I was under the microphone. Okay, so I lived in the Essex during the pandemic, and I just want to say, so I'm very, very well aware of what was happening there and paid very, very close attention to it. One of my very closest friends bought a condo in 202 Broome. There are a lot of promises made to the community and to people that were living there about what the Market Line would look like, and including putting small format vendors into Essex Crossing, specifically the Market Line, and that never really came to life. Like, for example, you can Google Market Line, there are 3 articles about it in 5 years. I just don't really think that there was a true effort made for that space to be successful. And I literally, during the pandemic, it was so pathetic, you know, what was done to keep it alive. Like, we once were able to buy a box of stuff from vendors, but like, there's just no attempt. And my understanding is that Taconic had no experience running a food hall. Like, I don't understand why someone like Urban Space or like an experienced vendor, like even EDC contracting with Taconic would run this place. Like, it was just so clearly poorly thought out from the very beginning, and the community really deserved more and deserves more from that space. We don't want to see a TJ Maxx there. That is not what we want. We wanted local vendors to be there, and so it's not our fault that the developers couldn't make it work. I mean, you know, I could have done it better. I mean, I'll put it out there. Like, I could have found community members who could have done it better. It was pathetic. You know, the first time I walked down there, I'm like, this is gonna fail. Like, this is horrible. You know, no one wants to eat down here. And so how is the city, and I guess this is a question for Gigi, ensuring that the commitments that were made to the community during the ULURP process going to be met? Like I said, not a big box store like TJ Maxx.
So the PJ or John, can you speak to what the relationship is, or sort of the understanding of the relationship around future tenants as it relates to EDC's role versus the developer?
Hi, this is John Raym from EDC. Apologies for not having my camera on. I got kicked off when I tried to turn it on last time. If I understand the question correctly, we are working with the developer for a re-envisioned market line. And of course, it's the developer's responsibility to deliver this portion of the space. But with our role is we're working on the developer, making sure that the ultimate vision that they have for this space is that it's in line with it's in line with what the community wants and what's in line with the approvals provided for this project.
And will EDC commit to coming back to CB3 for input before approving anything that the developers decide to put in there?
We will be sharing what future uses will go in this space with the community board.
Sharing does not sound like getting input, though.
Yeah, all right, we have, Valentina had her hand up. Susan has a question, and then I have someone online who has a question. So, but we're still in the committee session, and Valentina's a board member, that's why I'm letting her go.
Okay.
So if you want to speak, sir, can you give him Susan, can you hand him a speak? He wants to speak afterwards. He has a question afterwards. We have to keep a lot of it.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't mean to be overly.
She has it.
Okay.
It's a really long one.
Oh, this is you right here. Okay.
Okay, my question somewhat follows the statement that was made. My name is Valentina Jones, and I'm with the Lower East Side Power Partnership. At one of our last meetings, when we talked about the market line closing, what people said was that it wasn't marketed. And then when I went there and I looked around, I was like, yeah, they got a point. The only thing that says anything about downstairs is a little sign on the Delancey Street side. And I mean, this sign might be 8 by 11. That's it. And so the issue was the fact that it wasn't marketed in terms of what was downstairs. So the upstairs, yes, I understand. I read the whole thing about how successful it was, because you're walking there and you see what they have to offer. Whereas downstairs, you don't see what they have to offer, and there was no marketing. So how come there was no marketing for what was downstairs? No messaging about what was downstairs at the market line?
So that would be Andrew. Would that not be you to respond, Andrew?
That would be me. You know, I think I hear what you're saying about the marketing. I think that we could have a whole conversation about why the market line didn't succeed. And I think maybe the marketing would be part of that. I think there's a lot of other factors too. Someone mentioned how food halls are not a successful kind of model. I mentioned the office space, I mentioned COVID. But I think to rehash why the market line failed, I'm not sure, how that's gonna help. And we could, you can, like I said, you can spend a lot of time, I'm not sure how that's gonna help make the new market line successful, other than, incorporating your feedback on how the marketing is so critical.
So I'm gonna ask to make a comment, and then I'm going to go to the person online. And then, oh, I'm sorry, we have Susan. Susan, you go and then I'll speak.
Okay, thank you. Two things. One of the companies showing interest is a low-cost German supermarket. And I don't know how much you're engaging with them, but it seems like that would have a horrible negative impact on the vendors upstairs. So I was wondering if you had, is it Aldi? Is that a thing? Aldi's name? Oh,
Aldi's, yeah.
So one is the other thing is about the big box in general. There was during the Euler process, there was a lot of talk about big box, semi-big box, wanting restrictions on it. We have two huge ones that I know the community uses those, but we have terrible problems with the big box comes 18-wheelers. We cannot accommodate any more of that. There's no way. The city never planned for what exists there. It has caused constant problems. Andrew probably inherited all that information from Katie. We cannot accommodate any more 18-wheelers there, as well as not wanting big boxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So there's not really.
But I would like your comments about the German supermarket.
Yeah, can you respond about whether or not you're aware, or any information that you can share about whether you're in negotiations or discussions with Aldi's or any other food vendor of that magnitude?
Yeah, no, and I hear the complaints regarding traffic and loading, and I've seen it myself, obviously, with Trader Joe's. Obviously, there's supermarkets that have expressed interest because of the neighborhood, and what Trader Joe's has brought to the community. I think there's a Lidl opening on Grand Street. So obviously supermarket grocers are interested in the space. So they have toured through, but there's no negotiations, there's no offer from any supermarket.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just add, I think everyone here has talked about the sensitivities around what happens upstairs if a grocer came in downstairs regarding Essex Street Market.
Okay, so I think there's lots of sort of burning kind of questions that we are not, a lot of uncertainties. So we can't rehash maybe what might have happened, except that we should learn lessons from what happened in the past, right? So it's important to talk about our failures so that we can be successful moving forward. And so I live here, I've been to Essex Market upstairs, downstairs. And something I want to share is every time I go there, I ask myself, oh, this place is kind of cool. Why don't I come here more? And then I realize that there's nothing asking me or driving me to the Essex Market. Nothing at all. Not a flyer, not an event, not a sale, nothing. In fact, I decided to go there because I needed a place to have a meeting. And so I said, I think there's seating downstairs. And I only know that because I went to a private event there, not because I was a frequenter. So I encourage you all to help the community, help you all make this place successful with the kinds of businesses that we want. And that means that you'll have to invest some resources into marketing and into special events. Right now, I want to take you back to another time. There was another proposal for another space. It was called a low line. Okay, which some of us fought against because they proposed to do exactly what the market line did. And we stopped them from coming which means that that was an edge and an advantage for the market line. So I would say to you all, it is to your advantage to listen to what we're saying and include us in your decision-making to the extent that you can, and try to be true to the previous agreement. We don't wanna hash up the old stuff, but please invest some resources in marketing for the space and in understanding what it is that people want. And if you bring a massive supermarket, it's going to create chaos, and I'm sure it's gonna create a lot of headache for you all and a lot of community upheaval and protest. So I would, really reconsider that. Thank you. So we have one more question online. Okay, so since I told them that I was gonna let them go and they've been waiting, can I ask you, all right. So somebody by the name of LK, Lisa Catherine. She texted her question, is CB3 still sponsoring the Essex Crossing Task Force, or is it defunct? What an appropriate question.
It's not defined.
So the response is?
I think it meets quarterly, so it's what it is.
So the response to that, Lisa, is no, it is not defunct and it is meeting quarterly. And, why don't you just let her talk? You want to talk? Talk. Lisa, can you talk?
But it hasn't met quarterly, and this is, this would be a conversation that would typically happen at the task force with people who have been involved in this for the past 10 years, and are pretty knowledgeable about this. So the last meeting, I want to say it was November or maybe December or maybe earlier than that. So it really is not meeting quarterly. So, and the person who generally took responsibility for pulling it together is no longer with the developer. So I think CB3 really needs to make sure that it happens on a quarterly basis if it still exists, or more often.
Thank you for your feedback. Maybe we can talk to your team about regular updates, at least to this committee, until we can, get this issue more resolved. But Lisa's right. All right, thank you. Does anybody, Andrea, does anybody want to respond to that? No? All right, so then patiently, Bill Fern has been waiting to speak. And so I'd like to give him.
Yeah, other presentation.
I'm sorry?
On the
He's at It's a question.
Do I need a microphone?
Yes.
This, okay.
No, I think the battery's dead, is the other.
Hi, my name is Bill Burns. I'm in a group called the SALT Senior Advocacy Leadership Team from Manny Cantor. We had actually asked Essex Crossing to change those vacuum pack doors you used to have to the ADA doors, and you did that last spring, so thank you for that. But we have another accessibility problem, which may not be directly yours, but you're being blamed for it, which is that there's no accessible subway stations down here. The closest one from Essex Crossing is over a mile away up at 14th Street, First Avenue. We're trying to push the MTA to make Essex to Lansing a subway, a fully accessible subway station. It happens to be the 29th busy station in the entire subway network of 400. The MTA is blaming you guys by saying they need an easement from EDC or BSA, or I'm not sure what the organizational thing, in order to build the elevators. Now, they can do elevators on the west side of Essex Street. So I just want to make sure, first of all, that is in some area you control. And secondly, if there is a problem with the easement, can you tell us how you can address it quickly? Because they just keep putting it off and putting it off. And by the way, this is a packet of over 1,300 signatures we collected, not online, but in person, for the MTA to change, to accelerate getting the subway done within the 2025-2029 capital plan. And I'd be happy to deliver it to you guys for you to see that the neighborhood really wants this to happen. So I would appreciate if you could tell me what you know about the easement, or if you could tell me the APA just blaming you, we should go back and tell them.
Thank you, Bill. So I think this is taking us into the next part of our
Right,
the
yeah.
agenda item. And so that, which is in regard to sites 9 and 10.
Yes.
I think Gigi's gonna, Gigi, are you speaking about that?
I am.
All right, and so with that, this is great because she can keep this question in mind and just be patient and she'll answer it for you momentarily. Please go on. Thank you,
Great.
Gigi.
Great, thank you. Always excited and happy to be back at CB3. The update, well, thank you for all of the involvement for SALT. You know, your advocacy is heard loudly and clearly. The developer and EDC is currently in negotiations to find a new plan for Site 9. The reason I say new plan is because there were some assumptions and some legislation that was current at the time that, you know, CB3 and the city negotiated the ULURP and the passage of the ULURP back, I think, in 2012, that are no longer the case today. And so we've had to go back to the drawing table. An example of that would be that there is no longer 421A. The state legislators recently passed a new version of it, which is now called 485X. This was passed in the most recent, this past legislative year. And so we have had to sort of understand it, see how it applies to this site, and modify accordingly. So that is an example of something that has changed. In addition, just want to address, you know, I don't think MTA is blaming in terms of process. There needs to be a deal between the developer and EDC so that the actual property is signed over to the developer, and then the developer would then allow MTA to go into the site and start doing what is necessary to move forward with the accessible entrance. So it is a matter of just process and how it has, the order of things that has to be done.
So so thank you, Gigi. Is there anything else that you think that we should know regarding site 9 and 10 before I open us up for questions?
No, I think the only thing I would add is that a little over a month ago, on April 10th, there was a meeting between EDC, the developers, MTA, every single overlapping elected official that represents Essex, as well as the community board. And it was delivered, the message again was delivered very clearly that that the accessible entrance is a priority, and that EDC and the developer should negotiate faster and try to settle on a deal, because it's important that we move forward. And so we are meeting, and we hope to have a resolution as soon as possible. And of course, we would come back to CB3 with any updates.
Okay. So any other questions from the committee members? All right, Valentina, please.
Yes, Valentina Jones, once again, from Lower East Side Power Partnership. We wrote a letter about this and we got a response back from MTA. What I don't understand in what you said is that you need a new plan. Because the plan for the accessibility was very clearly stated that Site 9 was the place for that for a variety of reasons, because of the various subways, lines that are over there, that was the site for it to happen. So what exactly are you talking about in terms of the new plan? And does it affect the money? Because the money had already been allocated for that site to have an accessible, for accessibility. The money had already been allocated for that particular site.
Yes, hi Val, thank you for the question. So I want to be extremely clear. EDC and Andrew, please, and the developers and MTA are still very committed to delivering this ADA accessible entrance. In fact, the MTA has publicly stated that the capital funds needed for their portion of the work at this site will be committed to their fiscal year 25 to 29 capital plan, which their board will be voting on shortly. So you will see that commitment from MTA. So by the plan I'm referring to is just the plan of the deal, the real estate deal that is made between the city, in this case EDC, and the developers for the property and what is going to be built on the property.
Okay. So the other thing I don't quite get in what you're saying is that the property has to be signed to the developer. So if the developer doesn't have, if it has to be signed to them, who is it coming from that it has to be signed to them? From who?
From the city.
So the city has had this property all of this time. It wasn't the developer, because I have the sense from whatever I got was that the issue was that the developers and that particular, as a matter of fact, I can remember exactly what was said. What I remember hearing was that the reason they couldn't do it was because the developer might do a building, and if they did the accessibility first and then did the building might destroy the station. And so it sounded like this was really on the developer, that the developer could do kind of like what they wanted to, and that's why we had to wait for them, because their development might destroy the accessible station that you did. And now it sounds like you're saying that the city had this ability or really were in charge and in control, and it wasn't the developer. So explain this to me.
No, Val, that maybe I'm not being clear. So when the ULURP was agreed upon in 2012, there was a timeline for each site, because this was a multi-site plan, and the entire real estate transaction covered all 10 of these Spura sites, right? What has transpired between 2012 and now is that there have been changes both in the market and in some legislation that has necessitated the EDC and the developer to modify that plan. However, we understand that we've made commitments to the community, which we are still committed to honoring, and that we want to move those forward, right? I think that being said, building an elevator shaft and have it connect to an existing very complicated infrastructure, you can't build the subway station without knowing what else you're going to build on top of it, right? So it is an architectural issue. I'm not an architect, and I know I'm kind of simplifying it, but it's very difficult to dig 3 floors underground just to outfit an elevator without knowing and making accommodations for what you're building on top of all of that. And so again, it is a process. It is an ownership, access, and process situation. Andrew, I don't know if you want to add to that or anyone else from the EDC team that is, you know, more well-versed in that process than me, but that is my layman's understanding.
Just one other thing, I think the other thing to keep in mind, and this was in one of the letters that Power Partnership wrote, was the fact that congestion pricing is coming, and you expect people, down here that need accessibility. You know, congestion pricing is saying, you know, try to use public transportation. And then when you say try to use public transportation, but if you have an accessible issue, you're in a wheelchair, a scooter, whatever, well, you can't use the Lansing Street. So I'm just saying, I think one of the things to look at is the fact that we're gonna get hit with congestion pricing, and that there should be some consideration for people who have accessible needs here on the Lower East Side. Because otherwise, yes, let me just leave it at that. Don't need to keep going. The fact is, you should.
Thank you. So, thank you, Val, for those are really good comments. Thank you, Andrew, Gigi, John, and, Ariana has a question, so. All right, so here's the deal. It's 9:10, okay? I'm gonna give this last question in total 3 minutes, because we still have board business, committee business, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. So I just wanted to echo as well some of the concerns that were already stated about the commitment that we saw from the developers in terms of maintaining or promoting the market line. But my primary concern now is that we're talking about losing a space that's actually double the size, considering that the site next door that connects and was supposed to be an entire underground, I suppose, market remains empty. So I guess I would want to have a better understanding when you say that there hasn't been a substantial interest in the space. Is it considering both of the sites, I suppose? And as well as the fact that my understanding is that a lot of the sites that have remained empty, there was prior interest that maybe the developers were pickier in choosing who would fill it. So I'd like to know better the instructions or sort of the messaging that has been given to this third-party broker that's helping fill the space in terms of who you're looking and how flexible you are and actually committing to filling it.
Yeah, no, it's a good question regarding Site 2 and Site 3. The broker, we're looking at uses for both sites, whether they're used together or they're separate, but we're looking at both. I'm not sure what prior offers there were that were rejected, but the idea would be to put in a long-term use for both sites, 2 and 3.
So just as a quick example, we are getting a large commercial gym on one of the sites that
Site 4.
Interest quite a few years ago that was rejected, and that site remained empty for many years, and now it seems like it's circling back full circle. So in that case, that's something that the community would have largely benefited from had the developers been willing to work with them from the beginning.
Got it. Yeah, you're referring to Vital at Site 4. Understood.
Good point. I guess, further emphasizing the need for some level of community support and input or regular updates. This project took 60 years to get here. We're not gonna be done talking about it for another 20, okay? So, all right, let me take any questions. All right, there's only one other question. It is past our time. I will allow you to ask the question as the person that's online, but I need you to keep it to 1 minute, please. Lisa, you're next, you're up. Again. Just that, no?
I don't have another question. I'm sorry. Maybe I forgot to lower my hand. Sorry.
No worries, great. We are wrapping up, people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So EDC will be, and DSA will be keeping us up to date. Andrea, you will, the community board website talks about the quarterly calendar for because it's not a public meeting? Okay. All right, well, we'll get to that. All right, well, thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Have a safe
Thank you.
home. Thank you for sticking it out. You're welcome to stay, but we're gonna talk about what our next couple of meetings, so thank you. So if everyone on the committee could just power out really quickly. So, you know, coming up in June, we have to begin the process of recording our comments or resolution. I was wondering, Susan, if you happen to know, like with the economic opportunities piece, they had a standardized form that had the 18 different areas. So do you have a sense of what this process looks like yet? Have they released it?
I don't believe there, I will check, but I'm sure there's no standardized form. That was a very unusual thing, and it was much more, this one has a very big impact, but it's not as complicated as number of pieces.
All right, so next meeting, George James is gonna come and he's gonna present his findings and answer our questions, right? And then the process starts in July.
July is the end of the process. We,
that's when we vote in July?
We were voting, which is past 60 days, but we were given an extension, because it's before the DCP meeting. So the day after our full board is the deadline. So we're using the full time.
So just to be clear, right? We have the meeting in June, our committee meeting, and then the full board meeting. That obviously, then we meet again in July
and vote.
And we vote this committee and the full. That's when we will likely finalize our comments, our resolution, whatever we are going to submit. It will be in July. So that June, we can spend it, right, talking to George, getting our questions answered, doing our research, beginning to formulate any other comments, and then we'll be, in July is when we will submit. So,
so
we're gonna come
just to make it more fun.
Oh, great, thanks.
We're also doing our district meets and
Right, that's great.
so we have to kind of figure out how to do it. I know this committee worked a lot last year, so, you know, it may be, you may not want to change very much, but I would suggest, and other committees are doing this, that members might want to read it during the month. And if there's any suggestions on things that must be updated or changed, to send them, at least send it to you, because we don't want to have a public meeting online. Send to you, which sections they think need to be updated.
All right. Any questions?
Do you know what day our July meeting is gonna be?
Do I know what day?
Yeah, because I'm looking at
Yeah.
the calendar, I don't know if the third Tuesday or the fourth, because it's 5 Tuesdays.
Well, there's two. You mean hours or the full board?
I'm talking about hours.
It is.
Should be usually
June 18th.
June 18th, but we don't know
No,
July
June
yet.
18th,
We don't know
okay.
July yet. Or do you have a sense?
Oh, July, I'm sorry, I don't have the July one.
Yeah, so it's June 18th, and then we don't know yet for July.
But if you email me Friday, Steve, we should
Okay.
have my.
So, you know, don't worry, I'll probably follow up with some sort of an email that gives everybody some level of guidance. I know that this meeting, we talked out a lot and there was a lot of information, and so that's a lot to process. So I'll regroup with Susan, and we'll figure out what all the pertinent information is, and John and I will reach out then via email to give everybody, you know, a few next steps to be looking out for. So that we're as prepared as we can be. All right.
Motion to.
Anything else? Any burning last minute business questions?
I have one question.
Yes.
Are we gonna pass a resolution about the Essex Crossing situation? Like asking EDC to come back to us?
I don't think they're asking us for a resolution. That doesn't mean we can't pass a resolution, but I think we should talk about a process first of what it is that we would want to do, and whether we want to give them some time to come back to us and report or make some kind of a commitment. I mean, we don't have to, just because they're not talking to us and because it's not on the agenda, doesn't mean that we can't spend some time.
Yeah.
At some point.
It just didn't seem like we got a commitment. that
Let's
they'd come back.
flag it, let's keep paying attention to it right now, in case that's what we need to do. Okay, because if we need to do that, then we'll do that. Alright. Oh, I see. So, all right, so I think we're done. It is 9:20. All right, we're about, Andrea and I talked about, I thought I was gonna get us out of here at 8:30. I was dreaming, okay. All right, but this was good though, thank you. Roll call, I know, so we gotta, with no other questions, we're just gonna wrap up and roll call it out of here. Who's gonna do the roll call? Okay. I always do that to you, and I'm sorry, I'll get it right.
Damaris,
I'm here.
John,
Here.
Ariadna here, Alistair, Herman, Trevor.
Yes.
Michelle, Jaylene, Sandra.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Megan, Anisha. Yes.
Good night, all.
Everybody's here,
Yeah.
yay!